Welcome to the Glenn Mercer Show. You could find us across all your favorite podcast platforms. You could find us on YouTube, and please remember to subscribe. You could find us at realmeneatplants.com. This show is brought to you by First Seed Foods, healthy, nutritious, Indian food without the butter, oil, or ghee. I love Indian food, but I don't like the oil in the Indian restaurants. So you get this frozen. It arrives at your door. Firstseedfoods.com. Put in the code GLEN10 for $10 off your first order. My guest today is my friend Dr. Michael Klaper, and he will be answering your questions. This is going to be a new feature on the show. Dr. K answers your questions. Michael, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Glenn, and congratulations on having this show. It's wonderful that you're getting the word out here. Good.
Well, there's something else we could congratulate ourselves on. We're going to have a book come out,
We are.
and this is roughly what it's going to look like. It's not as thin as a piece of paper, but it's called Moving Medicine Forward. It'll be out next spring. We'll tell you when you could order it. And people have been waiting for Dr. Clapper's book for many years, and I was honored to help him with it. So, congratulations to you, sir.
Congratulations to us, sir.
Okay.
Yes, it's been great working with you, and yes, hopefully people really like the book.
All right. So what we're doing here is Dr. K answers your questions, and you can send in your questions. Just put in the subject line Dr. K, and send in your questions to ownyourhealthbook at gmail.com. That's ownyourhealthbook at gmail.com. And let's start with the first questions that have been sent in. This one says, too much fat, too much saturated fat can raise cholesterol. How about unsaturated fat?
Interesting question. Too much of anything is going to start cascades of unexpected consequences. They start interfering with blood clotting. They start interfering with um, the stability of cell membranes. As I said, dozens of reactions get set off if you're pouring, you know, tablespoons and tablespoons of flax oil or olive oil on your food there. And like our toxicologist friends say, the dose makes the poison. And, in teaspoon amounts or less, when there's uses of flavoring or just sprayed on a salad from a spray bottle, a little bit of oil, I think, is pretty benign. But once really comes out in significant liquid amounts, again, you start getting all these potential adverse effects. Will it affect your cholesterol levels? I've not seen any studies showing that it would. I'm not sure. Normally, the saturated fats interfere with the liver's ability to remove cholesterol out of the bloodstream, and so the cholesterol molecules pile up. I don't know. I don't think that the unsaturated fats do that. If not, not to that degree, at least, if at all. No, I don't think they'll raise your cholesterol, though. Since very few liquid fats that you get out of a bottle are pure polyunsaturated. Even olive oil is 14% saturated fats.
Mm-hmm.
That when I have especially a long-term vegan, I've been vegan 15 years and I've been watching my cholesterol inch up and up and up and up. Now, one of the questions I ask is how much oil do you use? How many restaurant meals do you eat a week? How much oil do you put on your food? How much processed food? Because indeed, oils, and again, many of them have a saturated fat component, can certainly be problematic when it comes to cholesterol. So when it comes to these artificial or processed foods, and oils are in that category, the good old saying, less is more, eat whole foods as much as possible, and you'll stay on the good side of your cholesterol levels.
Um, I'll add my question to that, which is this. Flax seeds, hemp seeds are often touted as superfoods. You can get your omega 3s that way. Walnuts, a very healthy fat. You could get your omega 3s. But all these very, very healthy fats have some saturated fat. So, uh, where do you draw the line? Is there any need for saturated? There's clearly a need, it seems, for omega 3s in the human diet,
Mhm.
and some of that is saturated, right? So,
Yes.
therefore, there's apparently indirectly, I guess, some need for saturated fat in the human diet.
Yes. And there's a question, do saturated fats wind up in your skin oils? Do they take part in cell membranes? And like everything else, we can handle small amounts of saturated fats. And when people have been living on coconuts for years and avocados, and there's a good dollop of saturated fats in those whole foods. And we don't seem to see any adverse effects when eaten in the whole food form. Again, and not to geek out on you, but I think it's an important issue regarding the fats in the body and the form in which they are delivered. When one eats a piece of coconut or bites into a walnut, there are micro droplets of coconut oil and walnut oil, etc. But if those droplets are firmly bound to the fiber of the coconut and the fiber of the walnut, and so you chew it up and you swallow it, and it takes a couple hours often for your digestive enzymes, for your amylases and lipases to penetrate that chewed up piece of coconut and piece of walnut. And as a result, the tiny amounts of fats that are present are liberated in tiny amounts. They go up in the bloodstream very slowly, very modest levels. One pass through the liver, one pass through the mouth. They're pretty much going out of the circulation. They don't exert a significant pharmaceutical effect. But you take that coconut oil, those walnuts, and you crush the fat out into liquid form. And you pour a couple tablespoons of coconut oil. I've seen people just drink it off the spoon there. Nothing slows down the absorption. That fat leaps into the bloodstream. And now you got a couple of tablespoons of saturated fat and coconut oil, whatever the oil is, in your bloodstream. And it starts having pharmaceutical effects, as has been demonstrated as the fat works its way up. The first thing it's going to hit is the inner lining of the blood vessels that's carrying that fat. Well, the saturated fats and the fats and oils in general, for a few hours, they paralyze the lining of the artery's ability to create nitric oxide, which allows the artery to dilate. Well, oils inhibit that important property. If you people are big saturated fat folks and the Mediterranean diet, oh, they pour lots of oil on their food there. Um, that's going to well, that fat week after week is going to work its way into the walls of the muscle cells, and the liver cells start interfering with insulin receptors and increasing insulin resistance. It's going to flow through the fat stores and stick there, increase obesity, going to increase blood clotting. Liquid oils start having pharmaceutical effects in the body that the whole plant fats, when eaten in the whole plant form, don't have. So that's the main reason a lot of us doctors say, don't use these liquid oils. There's liquid fat in a bottle, and it has these effects that are not beneficial for you. But if you want to have a handful of walnuts or some shredded coconut in your bowl of berries, that's fine, and not worth getting too exercised about the amount there.
Right. And the reason most people use oils is as cooking oils. And
Yes,
there's really no need for it because there's so many good alternatives. What are some of your favorite alternatives to cook with?
thank you for that. Sorry, just getting over a cold, so a little hoarse here. Um, the You can saute your veggies in anything that's wet. Water will
Right.
work, but we've got a big jar of vegetable broth in the fridge that we make up with. There's a powder we put in and add hot water. We add always a vegetable, a few tablespoons of vegetable broth into the wok or into the skillet certainly works. If my wife makes a big pot of vegetable soup, bean and barley soup, whatever, a couple spoonfuls of the broth of that works just fine. Beer, alcohol,
Beer.
wine. Yeah, the heat of the skillet evaporates the alcohol
Uh-huh.
off. And it's basically water and whatever flavors left over from the wine, etc. Anything wet will work, and any
Uh-huh.
aqueous solution.
Well,
And
let's
and
see if we have a scoop here. Does Dr. Clapper ever have zucchini sauteed in beer?
well, no, I have not had that. That's
Okay.
speaking theoretically.
All
Uh,
right.
but when the chefs in the restaurant do these flambeau
Uh-huh.
desserts, there, the alcohol evaporates right off there. There really isn't a problem there. But very importantly, and people should understand and take advantage of this, our tastes change. And after a few weeks of not using oil, you really start tasting the texture and the flavor of the vegetables. And the opposite starts happening. When my wife and I were out a few months ago, we were in a restaurant and we ordered our main dish, and there, oh, side dishes, sauteed veggies. Oh, great. But when the wait person brought the sauteed veggies over, they were sauteed in oil,
Yeah.
dripping oil. And we ate a couple. We couldn't, it was not even pleasant to eat. We realized how
Yeah.
much our taste had changed. And so you won't miss the oil. Be
Mm.
brave and experiment for a few weeks and don't use oil to saute your veggies. Your taste will reward you.
I know that feeling about oily food in restaurants.
Mm-mm.
I try to avoid it.
Yep.
Could you explain, Dr. Clapper, about advanced glycation end products and how we can avoid the aging effects of these damn things?
Really. Whoa. Interesting substance. They're fairly common in our modern world. What we're talking about are sugars that get attached to proteins and then heated. What does that mean? Well, when the baker is baking cookies, they mix their pastry flour, which is sugar, basically. Mix it with some kind of fat. There's some kind of I'm sorry, some kind of protein, um, which is the gluten in the pastry flour. And so you get a chemical bonding. The protein binds with these sugars. And you can create it if you put in just plain old cooking, white sugar. Uh, and the barbecue chef was slathering that sugary barbecue sauce on the ribs there. Same thing happens. The sugar attaches to the protein, and then it gets heated. The baker puts the cookies in the oven. The barbecue guy turns the rotisserie over. But also, we create the same phenomenon when we either eat cookies that already have this glycosylated protein in it, or we eat a protein-containing dish, tofu or chicken, whatever the person, whether or not they're vegan, and then follow it with a sugary drink. The sugars stick to the protein. And then the next step is our own body heat of 98.6, 37.0 for our Canadian metric friends. Our own body heat runs this reaction. If you heat glycosylated proteins, they start to break up in very destructive ways. Atoms lose their electrons. They become these things called free radicals. They are molecular terrorists. They will rip electrons to try and rebalance their electric charge. They rip electrons off any molecule they can that's nearby. Not a good thing in your human body. You don't want a bunch of free radicals on the fried foods and the baked goods to rip electrons off your cell membranes, off your DNA, off your metabolic enzymes. But that's what these oxidized, heated, glycosylated proteins will do. It's got a fancy name, advanced glycation end products. But again, see them as the bloody stumps, if you will, of proteins teeming with free radicals that damage nearby structures. and they age us. The acronym is APT, AGE, Advanced Glycation End Products, also spells age. And you eat a bunch of these constantly, the cooked meats and the beer and the alcoholic beverages and processed foods. And as the months and years go by, you wind up running these reactions in the elastin fibers of your skin and the inner lining of the blood vessels in your brain and your heart and in the crystalline lens of your eye. And people get cataracts. And it really accelerates the aging process. And yeah, when you steam broccoli, you don't produce AGEs. You know, when you eat a salad, you're not eating AGEs. When you make up a fruit smoothie, there's no advanced glycation end product. Still, the curve still comes back to a whole plant food diet, minimally processed. So it's an artifact of us cooking with fire, cooking with chemicals, letting our taste buds run our the better judgment when it comes to what is healthy food. So if you just avoid the high temperature cooking of all types, including baked goods, you'll avoid a lot of the AGEs.
Well, I, of course, eat a whole plant food diet, but I have to confess, I love my fresh baked bread,
Mm,
and that has a crust on it.
it does.
And that crust, I fear, has a lot of advanced glycation end products in it, right? Do I have to worry about my bread crust? And is that why I no longer look like I'm in my 20s?
You have to have bread crust look about you.
Yeah,
Um, and again, doubling back to a couple of answers ago, the dose makes the poison. And the amount of crust, yes, there's going to be some AGEs in the crust. Depends how dark and heavy the crust is, how long it's been in the oven, and how dried out it is. Um, and uh, and in theory, it's a problem. But again, the total amount of AGEs in a couple of slices of bread in a sandwich it's probably trivial, and
good,
I wouldn't worry about it.
good, because I don't want to give up my fresh baked bread.
Fair enough. It's delicious, isn't it?
All right. All right, Dr. Klaper. Dr. Greger has a video in which he refers to salt as one of the leading killers in the human diet. And yet, many people say that fermented foods are very healthy for the gut, but they're often salty. So, is it a good idea to eat kimchi?
Yes, fascinating question, and brings up an interesting point. Salt is an issue, especially in the American diet, and excuse me, as a recovering saltaholic myself, who used to just salt everything. It's not a good thing. I was running high blood pressure. I'd wake up at 150, 90 on a pretty regular basis. And and the more I read about it, the more problematic I see when salt gets into the bloodstream. And often you don't even taste it. It's in the spaghetti sauce at the Italian restaurants. It's in the many of the commercial breads, cheeses. If you were eating cheese, people don't realize that without salt, cheese would be inedible. It would just be a glob of fat. And most of the processed foods, the chips and the bips and the schmips, there's so much salt in the diet that the salt gets into the bloodstream. The sodium atoms, which is what half of salt is, now work their way into the walls of the arteries. They pull water molecules in with it, and so you wind up with getting this edema of the artery walls, and that makes the artery walls lose that ability to dilate and absorb the shock of every heartbeat there. They become stiffer. And the kidneys see all the salt in the bloodstream. Say, man, blood's gotten salty. Let's retain water and dilute out the salt. And the body and the kidneys do that. But now instead of pumping around 6 pints of blood, you're pumping around 7 pints, 8 pints of blood, and the more water in the pipes. Ask any plumber. It's going to raise the pressure. And so I was walking around with these high pressures. And it's hard on your arteries, it's hard on the brain, it's hard on the retinas, and it ages you, and it certainly sets you up for strokes, etc. Uh, so, um, so it really is a silent killer. And then, as we've learned lately, lots of sodium atoms in the blood turn on genes that open the door to autoimmune disease, to lupus and ankylosing spondylitis. Who knew that high salt diets can contribute to autoimmune disease? So again, welcome to Western medicine in the 21st century. And again, this is such an abnormal diet. Salt was such a rarity in prehistoric times and throughout human history here. Again, I've been learning how to entertain my tongue with non-salty flavorings, and so I squeeze lemon juice on my rice and beans there. We add celery juice to the soups. There's various ways to entertain your tongue without a lot of salt. Now, there was a very flowery answer to your question there about salt.
But kimchi is
Kimchi,
kimchi
exactly.
unhealthy since it's salty?
Thank you. So now we come around, well, what about these ingredients that are, quote, naturally salty? Now, I am not, and I'm a big fan of fermented foods. When foods ferment naturally, now all sorts of bacteria floating in the air settle down onto the surface of the shredded cabbage in the porcelain crock where the sauerkraut is being made. And their lactobacillus, they start generating acids, lactic acids, etc., and they give the sauerkraut that specific flavor. Now, however, I'm not a sauerkrautologist. I've never made it myself, and I can't say I'm schooled in the history of it. But somewhere along the line, and it's probably once you've made it, you've got to stop the fermentation, and you've got to preserve this big vat of shredded fermented cabbage from turning into just foul-smelling slop. Now the yeast are going to start growing. There's sugars in that ketchup. You're going to start. It's going to turn into just a microbiological soup. So somewhere along the line, you got to put the chemical brakes on the microbiological growth. And one way to do that, there's various ways you can add more acid, I suppose. But one way to do it is put salt in, and I think that's why it's added, and it's pretty significant amounts.
Yeah.
And that winds up with a fairly significant salt load. Now, can you find and you make no salt sauerkraut? I'm told such a product exists, and it's probably
I
worth.
haven't seen that. Have you seen that?
I think I saw it go by once on there. But some smart entrepreneur, I'm sure, is going to start coming up with it. But be on the lookout for it, or if you're going to make your own sauerkraut, find the lowest amount of salt you can get away with. So what about kimchi? Is there salt normally in kimchi? I think there is, but I think it's
Yeah.
much less because of all the other spices, all the chilies and hot sauces, which give it that wonderful flavor but also kills the bacteria. I mean, that's why the plants are making those essential oils. So find the product with least amount of salt. And again, the dose makes the point. You don't sitting there and just shoveling a half a jar of kimchi into your mouth there. It's a tablespoon onto your salad or onto your beans and rice there. And I think in small amounts, if it's a fairly low salt version of kimchi, I think it ought to be fine.
It's amazing to think about the bacteria floating in the air, just waiting for cabbage to show up to turn into sauerkraut. Do
We'll
they
work.
get bored if you don't bring out the cabbage? What do they do all day?
Well, they probably land on my head and keep the hair follicles from growing.
I
And
see.
right, but there's ubiquitous. We live in a sea of bacteria and fungi and viruses all around us. It's amazing we're not sick all the time. Thank heavens for your immune system.
Yeah. All right. Last question. If a potato is a little bit green below the skin, do I have to worry about solanine poisoning?
Oh, wow. Subtle questions. So what are we talking about? Um, and a little linguistic culinary history here. There's this remarkable family of vegetables that are very popular: eggplant, tomatoes, potatoes, and let's see, tobacco. And am I leaving out one? Um, but
Are these the nightshades?
these are the nightshade families. And I think the worst thing about them is the name. Ooh, deadly nightshade. Ooh. But botanically, if you ask a botanist about them, he'll say, or she will say, oh, they're all in the family of Solanaceae. And and that means all of them are capable of producing this alkaloid called solanum. And solanum, what's the purpose? I'm sure the potato and the tomato have their own uses for solanum. I'm not enough of a botanist to know exactly what it does for the potato, but it probably has, again, antibacterial properties to it, antifungal properties to keep these microorganisms in the soil. There's an underground root from invading the potato there. Where do you see it? If you if you take your potato peeler and you peel off the top of the skin, you often, depending how fresh the potato is, you see there's this greenish sheen on the surface of the potato. That's the solanum. Um, is it dangerous in any way? Not in the amounts that are being eaten, and most of it is destroyed. Nobody's eating raw potatoes. The very act of boiling the potato or baking the potato disperses most of the solanum and so it's not a problem. Apparently, the bad medical reputation is and I haven't seen any solid studies, but what I was taught is that if you take 100 patients with active autoimmune disease. They all have lupus or rheumatoid arthritis, ankylosing spondylitis, and you give them all a plate full of tomatoes and potatoes and eggplants and have them eat them. 90 of those hundreds will say, delicious, can I have some more? But about 10% will react really badly. Their joints will get all swollen, they will feel sick, they will really react to the solanum. So that's where the nightshade taboo comes from. And
Uh-huh.
so if I have an active patient with autoimmune disease, I tell them stay away from the nightshades for now. There will come a point as the disease regresses to try a piece of potato and see what happens. But you have to have the condition really quiescent. But that's the nightshade story and the solanum story. By and large, if you don't react to it, enjoy your mashed potatoes.
All right. When I was in my mid 20s, I lived in Boston in a group vegetarian house. And there was a macrobiotic center nearby. I guess the followers of Kushi, was that his name?
That's right.
And so we advertised for a new roommate in our group vegetarian house. And somebody came by who was a student of macrobiotic cooking at the Kushi Institute. And the first question he asked me, and I had never heard of nightshade vegetables, he asked me, do you eat vegetables that grow at night? I thought it was a strange question. I said, I never get up to watch. And he didn't move in. So there you go.
Yeah, so you're probably for the better, I would think.
Well, Dr. Klaper, thank you for joining us today. We will be back next week with more questions for Dr. K. You could send in your questions to ownyourhealthbook@gmail.com. And thank you so much for joining us. And we'll see you again very soon.
Take care, everybody. Bye bye.